There are structural reasons for that, and they are worth understanding, because the silence is not random, it is not accidental, and it is not because operators have nothing to say. If you have spent any real time in the powersports industry, whether as a dealer, a general manager, an OEM rep, a lender, a vendor, or someone close to the retail side of the business, you've probably noticed something. The people who know the most about what is actually happening in the market often say the least about it publicly. That is not because they lack opinions. It is not because they lack experience. And it is not because they do not understand the problems. In many cases, they understand them better than anyone. They know where the pressure is building. They know which programs are working and which ones are not. They know where inventory is sitting. They know how customers are behaving. They know what is happening with margins, financing, staffing, traffic, service capacity, parts, apparel, and used inventory. But most of that knowledge stays private. Conference panels are diplomatic. Trade publication quotes are careful. Social media from dealers is mostly promotional, and the real conversations happen somewhere else. They happen in hallways. They happen after meetings. They happen over dinner. They happen between operators who trust each other enough to speak plainly. This is not unique to powersports. Most industries have a gap between what people say publicly and what they say privately. But in powersports, that gap is especially pronounced, and the reasons are specific. The silence comes from dependency. That's the first thing to understand. Dealers are independent businesses, but they do not operate in isolation. They depend on OEM relationships for inventory allocation, warranty support, technical support, co-op advertising, program access, training access, brand permission, and sometimes even the basic ability to stay competitive in their market. Those relationships matter, and those relationships are maintained. A dealer who speaks critically about OEM practices, even accurately, even constructively, can be perceived as a difficult partner. And once a dealer is perceived as difficult, the risk changes. Maybe nothing happens immediately. Maybe nothing formal ever happens. Maybe nobody says anything directly. But the dealer knows how the business works. When supply gets constrained, allocation matters. When programs change, interpretation matters. When market support gets discussed, relationships matter. When there's a dispute, goodwill matters. This is not paranoia. That is rational risk management. This is where people sometimes get the issue wrong. They frame the silence as cowardice. That's too easy, and it's usually not accurate. Most dealers are not silent because they are afraid of their own opinions. They're silent because they understand the economic structure around them. If you operate a dealership, you do not have the luxury of acting like a commentator. You have payroll, you have inventory, you have floor plan, you have customers, you have staff, you have technicians, you have receivables, you have aged units, you have manufacturer targets, you have local competition, you have a business that has to open tomorrow morning. So when someone says, why don't dealers just say what they really think? The answer is simple. Because saying what you really think publicly can create risk without creating any immediate operational benefit. And operators are trained to avoid unnecessary risk. That same logic applies beyond the OEM relationship. It applies to vendor relationships. It applies to floor plan lenders, to industry associates, to insurance providers. It applies to media partners. It applies to anyone who controls access, terms, support, reputation, or opportunity. These are not always adversarial relationships. In many cases, they're good relationships, but they are interdependent relationships. And in interdependent relationships, public criticism carries risk that private criticism does not. That's the first layer. The second layer is competition. Dealers are local businesses competing in local markets. That matters. A dealer may have solved a real problem. Maybe they figured out how to convert more service customers into sales opportunities. Maybe they built a better used inventory process. Maybe they found a way to move aged units without destroying gross. Maybe they improved apparel attachment. Maybe they changed how they handled internet leads, or built a cleaner handoff between sales and F&I. Maybe they improved technician efficiency. Maybe they created a better inspection process for trades. That knowledge has value, and because it has value, dealers are hesitant to share it, even when sharing it would not actually hurt them, even when the other dealer is 100 miles away, even when the markets are different, or the customer bases do not overlap. The instinct toward operational secrecy is strong, and in some cases, it is justified. Nobody needs to publish their entire playbook. Nobody needs to give away a genuine competitive advantage. But here's the problem. Most of what dealers keep private is not really proprietary. It's not a trade secret or magic. It's operational learning. And operational learning is exactly what this industry needs more of. A dealer in one market may have already solved the problem another dealer is struggling with. A GM in one store may have already discovered the mistake another GM is about to make. A parts manager in one dealership may have figured out a process that would help 10 other stores. A sales manager may have found a better way to handle leads, follow-up, appointments, and handoffs. But because everyone is operating in isolation, the knowledge does not move. The silence is mutual, and it is collectively expensive. That's one of the quiet costs in this industry. The business is full of operators learning hard lessons alone. Aged inventory, weak follow-up, poor CRM discipline, low F&I penetration, service bottlenecks, apparel departments treated as decoration instead of retail businesses, parts departments that have customer demand but no selling rhythm, sales teams that confuse activity with process, owners who know something is wrong but cannot always see where the leak is. These are not rare problems. They are common problems. But because the public conversation is so limited, every store ends up thinking its problems are more unique than they really are. And that slows the industry down. The third layer is capacity. Most dealers are not media companies. A 20-person dealership is not built to produce consistent public content. The owner is busy. The GM is busy. The sales manager is busy. The fixed ops team is busy. The marketing person, if there is one, is usually buried in promotions, events, inventory posts, OEM assets, customer messages, and last-minute requests. So even when a dealership has something useful to say, there's usually no structure to say it, no time, no editorial discipline, no production rhythm, no clear upside, and no appetite to create unnecessary exposure. So the default becomes silence. Not because there's nothing to say, because there's no safe, useful, repeatable structure for saying it. That matters. Because when an industry does not have strong public operating conversations, the vacuum gets filled by safer material. Product launches, event recaps, promotions, awards, ribbon cuttings, factory announcements, dealer anniversaries, photos from rides. All of that has a place. But none of it tells you what is really happening inside the business. It does not tell you where demand is softening. It does not tell you where dealers are over-inventoried. It does not tell you where gross is disappearing. It does not tell you what happens when floor plan pressure builds. It does not tell you how much of the model depends on financing. It does not tell you what happens when insurance costs block new riders. It does not tell you how many stores are quietly carrying more pressure than they admit. That conversation exists, it just does not usually happen in public. Understanding why the silence exists matters because it explains a specific gap in this industry. There is an enormous amount of operational knowledge distributed across powersports that never surfaces publicly. Dealers who have solved hard problems, general managers who know what actually works, salespeople who understand where customers are hesitating, service managers who know what is breaking in the customer experience, parts managers who know which habits create repeat business, apparel managers who understand how to turn lifestyle into margin, OEM reps who see patterns across stores that no single dealer can see, lenders who understand where affordability is changing, vendors who see which dealers execute and which ones only talk. That knowledge exists, but most of it stays local. It stays private. It stays inside personal relationships, and the industry moves slower because of it. The operators who create the most leverage from the current moment are not always the ones with the most information internally. They're the ones with the best access to distributed knowledge. They have relationships outside their own store. They talk to peers outside their immediate competitive geography. They compare notes with operators who have no reason to posture. They listen to vendors who see across the market. They know which OEM reps will tell them the truth. They know which dealers are worth calling. They know which private groups are useful and which ones are just complaint rooms. That is where the intelligent advantage lives, not in press releases, not in promotional posts, not in the public version of the industry. The intelligence advantage comes from proximity to people who have nothing to protect by telling you the truth. That is also why public industry conversation matters. Not because every dealer needs to start criticizing their OEM online. That would be reckless. Not because every operator needs to publish their private numbers. That would be unrealistic. And not because every problem needs to become public conflict. It does not. But the industry does need more serious operating conversation, more direct analysis, more accurate framing, more people willing to say the quiet structural things without turning them into personal attacks. That distinction matters. You can discuss the structure without attacking the people inside it. You can talk about the incentives without blaming the operator. You can talk about pressure without pretending everyone is failing. You can talk about dealer economics without making it political. That is the lane this industry needs more of, because silence protects relationships in the short term, but over time, too much silence protects bad assumptions, and bad assumptions are expensive. If you work inside the powersports business and want clearer analysis of the forces shaping dealer economics, market structure, and network performance, subscribe to PSX, the Standard.